Executive order starts the process of opening offshore areas to job-creating energy exploration.
Offshore drilling is a process that is based on something called the 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan is laid out to open up certain leases off of certain states to drilling. Previously, the Obama administration had removed North Carolina from this plan, as well as Virginia and actually the entire East Coast, with the exception of parts of Florida and the Gulf, and certainly the West Coast. When Donald Trump was elected president, he signed an executive order that undid, well, at least he said it undid, we're not sure if legally it undid, the Obama administration's 5-year plan and protections off the Virginia coast and the removal of all the East Coast states.
The whole Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act process kicks in, and that's a process by which they put out certain leases for bid, and the companies bid on them, and then there's an environmental analysis review period, and then there's a further sort of a more comprehensive, a more focused environmental analysis period, and that sort of thing. So that's the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act, more of a procedural statute for how the permitting process, the leasing process goes. But overlying that, you've got the National Environmental Policy Act, which requires whenever a federal agency, like for example the Bureau of Energy Management, Department of the Interior, something like that, is going to take a major federal action that might significantly affect the human environment, that agency is required to do an environmental impact statement. Or maybe even more substantively, you have the Endangered Species Act, which requires federal agencies to avoid taking actions that might endanger any species that's listed as either threatened or endangered. And of course, as it happens off the coast of North Carolina, right off Cape Hatteras actually, there's a hot spot. There's a biodiversity hot spot for marine mammals, for example, some of which are listed as protected, as threatened or endangered under the Endangered Species Act. And beyond that, you've also got the Marine Mammal Protection Act, which in turn has some protections for marine mammals. You can't, adversely affect more than small numbers of these animals. You can't have more than a negligible effect on these animals. So there are a number of legal questions that are going to need to be answered before they can go forward, lawfully go forward with oil and gas exploration development off the coast.
So we are right now waiting for the National Marine Fisheries Service to issue incidental harassment authorization to the several companies that have asked for those authorizations to conduct geophysical surveys along the coast of North Carolina and elsewhere along the Atlantic seaboard. We're expecting those IHAs to be issued any day now. And once that happens, BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, will probably give the green light for the surveys to start, at which time a series of lawsuits will be filed to try and prevent that from happening.
The areas where they think they're going to go look for oil, the continental shelf edge, the continental slope, and so forth, aside from being physically dynamic, in many cases, these are biologically important places. This is where you see a lot of your marine mammals, not in real shallow water, but in the deeper water offshore, and not out in the open ocean so much, but right on the edge of the continent. That's where they want to look for oil and gas, because that's where they think they'll find it. So you've got a coincidence of not just marine mammals, by the way, but turtles, seabirds, and a variety of other things that are all going to concentrate in the same areas where they are proposing to look. And this set of possible impacts includes the seismic exploration activities, exploratory drilling, and whatever production they eventually generate. So the impacts would be maintained throughout the life cycle of an offshore oil and gas industry.
Yeah, so it's not drilling so much. Drilling introduces some noise, but it's really the seismic surveys, it's the air gun surveys. They're the loudest anthropogenic source of sound we put into the ocean. And they occur at fairly low frequencies, so those sounds travel very long distances. I mean, they're enormously loud sounds. So the question is how animals are going to respond when they haven't been exposed to that. You know, it's like having a jackhammer in your kitchen all day. You know, you're probably going to move out of your kitchen, but are you going to be able to live in your living room, or is that too loud? Or are you going to move out of your apartment? Or is that going to stress you out so much that you're going to succumb to something else? It will be the biggest change in the soundscape of the Northwest Atlantic in our collective lifetimes. And it's not just a trivial decision we're making, it's something that will fundamentally change the environment in which those animals live in.
In addition to that, the more we learn about the fisheries off this coast, the more we find that area, the edge of the continent, is important spawning habitat for some number of commercially and recreationally important fishes.
Commercial snapper grouper fisherman out of Morehead City, and so I came to the meeting because of the impacts mostly of the seismic testing right now is what I'm concerned with. There's 6 different corporations that are proposing to do their seismic testing. Those results will be secret. What I'm asking NOAA and BOEM to do is do a round of public testing using the safest modern technology, that's safer for the environment and better for the fishermen, and make those results public. And then we can have an informed discussion about whether it's worth the risk to go forward with doing it.
I have heard secondhand that some of the fishermen in the area who are, the fishing is quite depressed around here, are thinking, oh boy, if oil and gas comes, we'll have a job. I don't know if that's the case. Well, that's the other thing. There's all risk for North Carolina with no real benefit. There's the 8G line. I guess you've read about that, where if drilling occurs on within that 8G line, basically closer to shore, the state gets a portion of the profit. But that is not true here, and it's actually being phased out, I believe, in the Gulf of Mexico. The federal government wants and needs that money. And I don't think the states are going to get it, but that was one of the carrots that was dangling that, oh, maybe we can get you some money at the state level. It was also kind of funny. I heard that right now tourism in North Carolina supports about 51,000 jobs. And the stats from oil and gas would be that it would support 50,000 jobs. So, based upon those numbers, why risk our 51,000 jobs that we know is successful for 50,000 jobs that we may not be successful?
Almost every community on the U.S. East Coast has voiced opposition, and from Florida north to Virginia has voiced opposition. So our economy is almost entirely dependent upon tourism. So if people decide not to come to the coast, then our economy collapses.
I mean, I just can't imagine any scenario where offshore drilling in North Carolina would be a positive thing. The opposition, the pro-drill folks say that it'll provide jobs. So I'm wondering what jobs they're talking about, because we don't have any infrastructure to bring the oil onshore. And if we want to build that infrastructure, that's going to do some very serious damage to our tourism industry, and it's going to take a long time and be really expensive considering oil is hovering around $60 a barrel right now. It's not really worth the investment.
We don't have the infrastructure in this state to accommodate those resources in any event. We have 2 small state ports. There are no oil pipelines anywhere close to the coast in North Carolina, no place to refine oil, and no possibility that oil refineries will be built in coastal North Carolina. They used to do that, and public opposition to that is savage. Here in Wilmington, some knucklehead proposed opening a small oil refinery downtown about 20 years ago, and the opposition was instant and severe. Like, hell no. No, you're not going to do that.
And so if oil comes onto our beaches, people aren't going to come in the summer, and then restaurants will close, and people won't be able to, people's livelihoods will be ruined.
And then there's also just the degradation of the coastal communities as far as becoming industrialized. And if there are spills and all, the fishing would probably become worse. I mean, even with seismic survey, it seems to negatively impact fishing.
And even though the API, the American Petroleum Institute, and oil companies say that there will be economic revenues coming back to those communities, that's almost certainly not going to happen. The economic revenue will go to places like Norfolk, where the infrastructure already exists. But the communities, places where I live, for example, Beaufort, they bear the risk.
There are a number of avenues to participate publicly in these kinds of permit processing and leasing procedures. There's a federal statute called the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act that has several processes by which environmental analyses are done at varying degrees of focus. There are statutes like the National Environmental Policy Act that call for public input whenever they put these things out for review. There are, in addition, there are separate statutes that provide citizens the right to raise questions about whether a particular activity might adversely affect an endangered species. So there are a number of ways for the public to get involved in these processes.
So I head up our no drill or our anti-offshore drilling issue or campaign in North Carolina for the Sierra Club. So that involves working with a collaboration or a collaborative of other environmental groups called No Drill NC. And I represent the Sierra Club staff on that in that coalition. We organized a rally in Raleigh. I don't know if you guys heard about that, when BOEM came into town to get our input, by not really getting our input, the public meeting that wasn't. So we organized a rally around that, and we got somewhere like 500 people, which was one of the biggest turnouts in the country.
So we've already seen people talk to their local representatives. Their local representatives have stood up. People working through NGOs like Oceana, which have been very effective at mobilizing support. And I think we just need to keep telling our representatives at the local, state, and federal levels that those of us who oppose it, and we expect those representatives to act on our behalf. And for the most part, they're doing that.
I know what's at stake here. I'm going to fight to keep our coast safe. Now, we've listened to the experts. We know that opening up our coast to drilling would put our economy, our environment, and our coastal communities at risk, with little potential for long-term gain. Offshore drilling is just a bad deal for our state.
But the coast doesn't just belong to us, the coast belongs to everyone, and you guys live in Durham, Raleigh. I mean, you come down to the beach, it's your beach too, so you can absolutely use your vote as your voice. Tell your representatives, your senators, that that you're opposed to offshore drilling. And when the comment period, when the final draft is released, there will be another comment period where you can send in public comments, and you can also rally other people to send in public comments.